My daughter-in-law locked me out of my own house and said this is our home now. I called one person. 20 minutes later the police and a moving truck arrived. Family story. I stood on the front porch of the house I had lived in for 38 years and stared at the deadbolt that no longer accepted my key. The afternoon sun sat low over the quiet street of maple trees and tidy lawns in our little Ohio suburb. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the block. My grocery bag sat at my feet. The new lock gleamed like it was laughing at me. I tried the key again. Nothing. I knocked hard on the door. After a long minute the door opened just wide enough for Megan's face to appear. My son's wife. She had that calm, practiced expression she always used when she wanted something finished. "This is our home now," she said. "You need to leave." I heard the words, but they didn't settle right away. I had left the house 2 hours earlier to pick up a few things at the store. When I came back the lock had been changed and the woman who had lived under my roof for 11 months was telling me I no longer belonged there. "Megan, open the door." She didn't move. Behind her I could see boxes stacked in the hallway that hadn't been there that morning. My late husband's old recliner had been pushed against the wall. My framed photos were gone from the console table. "Ethan and I talked," she said. "We've decided it's time. You can stay with your sister or find a place of your own. This house is too much for one person, and we're the ones who have been taking care of everything." I felt the plastic handles of the grocery bags cutting into my fingers. The milk would go warm soon. I set the bags down carefully on the porch and looked past her into the living room I had painted 3 times over the years, the same room where Ethan had learned to walk and where my husband used to fall asleep with the evening news on. "This house is in my name," I said. My voice stayed even. "It has always been in my name." Megan's mouth tightened. "Ethan is your only son. We're family. That means something." "It does," I answered. "It means you don't lock a 71-year-old woman out of the only home she has left." She started to close the door. I put my hand against it. The wood was solid. I had chosen that door myself after a storm took the old one 20 years ago. "If you force this," she said, "I'll call the police and tell them you're causing a scene." "You don't want that, Helen." I let my hand drop. She shut the door. The deadbolt slid home with a clean metallic click. I stood there for a full minute. The street was empty. Mrs. Delaney's porch light came on across the way. A car passed slowly, then turned the corner. I could feel the heat of the afternoon still rising off the concrete. My keys hung useless from my fingers. I sat down on the top step and took out my phone. My hands were steady. I scrolled past Ethan's number. I scrolled past my sister's. I stopped on one contact I had saved years earlier and never needed until now. I called. The man who answered knew my voice immediately. We had known each other since our children were small. His name was Raymond Holt. He had been a county prosecutor before he retired, and he still kept a small practice out of his home office 3 towns over. More importantly, he held a copy of the power of attorney my husband and I had signed long before the cancer took Frank. Raymond also held the original deed information and the trust documents that named me sole owner of the property. I told him what had happened in short, plain sentences. I told him the lock was new, that Megan had refused entry, and that boxes were already stacked in the hallway. He asked only 2 questions. Was I still on the property? Was anyone else inside with her? Yes and yes. "Stay where you are," he said. "Don't argue with her again. Don't go around back. Just wait." I waited. 20 minutes is not a long time when you are sitting on your own porch with bags of groceries and nowhere to put them. It is long enough to notice every small detail of the neighborhood you thought you knew by heart. The way the maple leaves were already starting to turn at the edges. The sound of a lawnmower 2 streets over. The faint smell of someone's charcoal grill. I thought about the day Ethan and Megan had moved in. Ethan had lost his job at the distribution center. Megan's hours at the clinic had been cut. They needed a place for a few months while they got back on their feet. I had said yes without hesitation. The house was too quiet after Frank died. Having them there felt like the right thing. At first it was fine. Then Megan began rearranging furniture without asking. She started referring to the guest room as our room. She moved my mother's china to the basement and put her own dishes in the cabinets. Ethan stayed quiet. He always did when Megan made decisions. Last month she had suggested I sell the house and downsize. I had told her the house was not for sale. She had smiled the same thin smile she wore today and said we would talk about it later. We never did. A dark sedan pulled up first. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, gray at the temples. The other looked young enough to be Ethan's age. Raymond's truck arrived right behind them, followed by a white moving van with a local company's name on the side. Raymond walked up the steps like a man who had done this kind of thing before. He nodded once at me and then spoke quietly to the officers. Papers changed hands. I heard my name and the address and the word sole owner and no transfer of title. The older officer knocked on the door. When Megan opened it, her face changed the moment she saw the uniforms. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you and with Mr. Carter if he's here." Ethan appeared behind her. He looked pale. He would not meet my eyes. Raymond stepped forward and spoke in the calm voice he had always used in court. He explained the ownership. He explained the power of attorney. He explained that changing the locks without the owner's consent and denying the owner entry constituted unlawful exclusion. He handed Megan a copy of the relevant pages. She tried to argue. She said they had been living there, that they had paid utilities, that family should come first. Raymond listened without interrupting. When she finished he said, "None of that changes the title. The house belongs to Helen Carter. You will need to leave the premises today. The moving company is here to assist with your belongings if you choose to pack now. Otherwise the officers will remain while you gather what you need for the night and you can arrange the rest later under supervision." Megan's voice rose. Ethan put a hand on her arm and she shook it off. One of the officers asked them both to step outside onto the porch so the conversation could continue in the open air. Neighbors had started to notice. Curtains moved in windows. Mrs. Delaney stood on her own porch with her arms folded. I stayed seated on the step. I did not speak. I watched my son's face as the reality settled on him. He looked younger than his 34 years. He looked lost. The movers waited by the van. Raymond gave quiet instructions. Within another 20 minutes boxes began coming out of the house. Megan's clothes. Ethan's work boots. The television they had brought. The children's toys that belonged to Megan's niece from a previous visit. My things stayed where they were. Megan tried one last time. She stood in front of me and said, "You're going to regret this. Family doesn't do this to family." I looked up at her. The late light caught the side of her face. I thought of every meal I had cooked for them, every time I had watched their dog when they went away for the weekend, every quiet evening I had spent alone so they could have the living room. "I am still family," I said. "This is still my home. Those two facts are not the same thing you thought they were." She turned away. Ethan paused at the bottom of the steps. For a moment I thought he might say something. He only nodded once, almost to himself, and followed his wife to the car that had been parked in the driveway since morning. The officers stayed until the last box was loaded. Raymond walked through the house with me afterward. The new lock was removed and the original one put back. He handed me the keys. "You did the hard part already," he said. "The rest is just paperwork if they try anything later." I thanked him. He left. The street grew quiet again. The grocery bags were still on the porch. The milk had gone warm. I carried them inside anyway. The house smelled the same as it always had. The floorboards creaked in the familiar places. I set the bags on the kitchen counter and opened a window. Evening air moved through the rooms. I walked from the living room to the hallway to the bedroom I had shared with Frank for most of my adult life. Everything was still there. I sat in the recliner Megan had pushed aside and looked at the empty space where the boxes had been stacked. The light through the front window turned the color of old brass. Somewhere down the street a child laughed. A car door shut. Life continued the way it always does in a neighborhood like this. I stayed in that chair until the sky went dark.